Hello and welcome to the Biometric Update podcast. I'm your host, Joel McConvey. Today's episode is all about age assurance. Right now, age assurance is one of the hottest topics in the biometrics and digital identity sector. Around the world, governments are realizing they need a way to keep young people from accessing adult content online.
Age assurance has been around for over 100 years, since we first started stopping children buying tobacco and buying gin. The technology has been around a lot more recently. Only really about 5 years ago were politicians' minds changed into the thinking that the internet can be regulated.
That's Tony Allen. He runs the Age Check Certification Scheme, a UK organization that certifies age assurance providers. He's also the host of the 2025 Global Age Assurance Standards Summit in Amsterdam. The summit brings together policymakers, vendors, academics, and other stakeholders to discuss age assurance technology, legislation, and regulation, and to contribute to the development of a global standard for age assurance.
Global regulators, global governments, age assurance providers all coming together, looking at how the way that global standards can help local regulations to work well.
I attended the summit along with Biometric Update's managing editor, Chris Burt, and Chris is here to talk a bit about the trends and takeaways that came out of the event. Chris, you and I were at the conference in Amsterdam together. What did you notice happening there in terms of developments around the age assurance industry and regulations and policy and everything else that was being discussed?
Well, I guess I would start off by saying there did seem to be a lot going on multiple fronts. As the Age Assurance Standards Summit, the standards work did take a prominent place, and you could definitely observe that a lot was happening in terms of standards formulation and creation and discussion, although a lot of those standards bodies discussions were off limits to those of us who are not involved directly in the process. So to some extent you can see that things were happening even if you couldn't tell what they were. In some of the other areas, I would say that the engagement of the different parts of the ecosystem, including governments, civil society, technology providers, was another prominent part of the event, and we heard a lot of interesting discussion about the different challenges that each side faces. And so as some of these regulations get operationalized and enforcement starts and so on, there's going to be some details worked out around that for sure. But I guess the sort of top takeaway that I had was just the level of enthusiasm that this stuff is actually happening, and not just happening in a longer term sense, but happening now.
Yeah, I think it definitely feels like a sector that's kind of on the verge of becoming, what you might call mainstream. People are going to start to understand what this technology is, whereas right now you say age assurance, and it's still kind of a niche topic. So we're still kind of at the beginning, but it's accelerating really quickly. I definitely noticed that, you've got people looking beyond the kind of currently popular technologies, beyond like facial age estimation and face biometrics altogether. You've got people on the regulatory side looking to standards that are going to be published by next year. Right, so you've got lots of very dynamic change happening. What did you think about they sort of had this UN style plenary arrangement where all the nations sat around? What did you think about that kind of meetings in the round format that they were using?
Yeah, it was really interesting, and they were framing it up a little bit in terms of the G20 nations being furthest along in general with age assurance regulation, and with I guess just dialogue around age assurance as well. And I think that did bear out to some extent, although I think one of the insights that we can take from that is that there's a lot of diversity among those G20 nations and other countries around the world, both in terms of where they're at this point. We're having this discussion in Canada, where one of our key pieces of legislation for age assurance died with the conclusion of the previous government. So when it was our country's turn to speak, a lot of the discussion was about things that we might do, as opposed to things that we are doing. And there are other countries in that same situation where there are then further countries that are not even really at the stage of bringing forth legislation, and or just trying to decide what kind of legislation they should even be considering. And then on the other side, you had countries and delegations leading some of those discussions that are much further along. And then even amongst them, there was some diversity in terms of approach. For instance, the Brazilians seem to be making fast headway, but are very much focused as a first use case on gambling. Whereas in other countries, we saw more of a focus on social media or on pornography, or on all three together. And so I felt like it was certainly an interesting experiment, and there were conversations where it seemed to yield some interesting results, and certainly countries were very keen to share with each other and learn from each other. But at the same time, there was a limitation to that approach, in the sense that, as I say, everybody's a little bit all over the map still.
Yeah, fair enough. Something that I found interesting was, Australia was kind of a recognized leader at the summit, and the
Mm-hmm.
ACCS, which hosted the summit, is working with the Australian government on the age assurance technology trial. But there was also this moment where someone brought it up to you. I think maybe it was one of the people from Yoti, that Germany has kind of flown under the radar as a leader on this stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
they've actually tested something like 40 different methods of age assurance.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's a lot of knowledge to be shared there, and I think that's one of the valuable bits about bringing everyone together in that international context.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, that was Julie Dawson from Yoti brought that up specifically to me, and for us as native English speakers, it is, I think, easier to miss some of these different developments that are happening in different places, and so that is absolutely part of the value of an event like this. Yeah, and you're quite right to point out that, there was a lot of exchange about just what kind of information is out there, and I think it is highly likely that some of those conversations are still continuing, even though the summit has concluded and so on. And I think that was definitely part of the design, and the intention of the summit was to foster those conversations going forward. But I know for us at Biometric Update, we're still finding out some of these developments that have happened, in the past around the world, and it seems like everybody else is in that same boat as well.
Yeah, we should mention maybe at this point that we have produced an age assurance market report with good intelligence, focusing on the UK market for age assurance, but it features profiles of providers. It gives sort of an overview of the regulatory landscape. So that's available at the website if you go to www.biometricupdate.com.
I think there is consensus still that age assurance can be done. It can be deployed with the right process for a diverse range of use cases in a manner that is privacy preserving, data minimizing, secure, effective and efficient. It can be a valuable tool amongst a range of measures deployed to protect children in the digital environment. Global age assurance standards can help local regulations to work well.
I believe you sat down with the folks from Yoti, with Robin Toombs and Julie Dawson at the summit. Is that right, Chris? Maybe you can give us a bit of an idea of what you spoke about with them.
Yeah, I did. I was very fortunate. They were very gracious with their time, and we talked about a number of the issues that we just touched on. A bit of a wide-ranging conversation, but including the changes that have been happening in the UK market and the uncertainty around them, such as the introduction of the gov.uk digital wallet, the accompanying mobile driver's license, and the possibility that the public sector could be providing the credential that people use for age assurance, the method by which it's presented, and thereby competing with all the private sector companies that have just invested their time and money in being certified to the digital identity and attributes trust framework. So that was a topic which came up repeatedly during the summit and was referred to explicitly or kind of implicitly in a number of conversations about the way that these things should work, the role of trust frameworks, how the market is evolving to address different use cases for age assurance, and that includes both online age assurance, which is most often what we were talking about, but also offline age assurance, things like retail for purchasing alcohol or something like that. And Yoti has been very active in this market really since it started to emerge, and so they have experience doing a lot of the different things that we were talking about at the summit, including the offline age assurance in a retail setting, including age assurance for different types of sites, be it pornography or social media or something else. And so we talked a lot about how that experience aligns with what was said at the summit, and for instance, how realistic some of the expectations are and how clearly the different pieces of the market are being understood.
Here's a bit of Chris's talk with Yoti's Chief Policy and Regulatory Officer, Julie Dawson, on the ground in Amsterdam at the Global Age Assurance Standards Summit.
There's countries with different demographics, different cultures, different online practices, maybe different balance of what's online versus offline might start sort of surfacing new challenges or new issues in, for instance, gambling. I found it very interesting in the Nigerian presentation. They talked about social media, not so much of a concern for us. We're concerned about gambling. So do you see the market and the sort of niches that are available in it sort of change from that process?
One of the things I thought, and John Carr mentioned this, if you looked a decade ago, that was probably one of the first sectors where actually that was a concern. And if you're a little bit like in the offline world, physically letting a 5-year-old into a casino is pretty visible. And then if you look over time at which are the next sectors in a range of countries, it has gone from gambling to then starting to look at, how do we do this, not just in person for, say, nicotine goods, but also online, that e-commerce element. And then, depending on the country, the adult content has probably been the next sort of big ticket issue where there's been consensus. So you're starting to see this curve of sectors that actually has got quite a few links across different countries. But your point was interesting with regards to the sort of different issues that are local as well as the global ones. So I was just in one of the presentations from India, and they'd surveyed young people, and 77% of those young people were on shared devices, which creates hugely different context. So they said, for us, the operating system and app level, that's not really going to solve it for us because we've got so many young people on shared household devices. So even if they do set up these parental controls and they're looking at a really high level of 18, and you need verifiable parental consent up to 18, they're also thinking, what is the inequity if in that society they have a really different view of the parent towards a male and a female child, and could that entrench that inequity within their society, and what is the impact on the 13 to 18s in society of all these proposals that have been put forward. So yeah, I think this has forced us to look at different angles. So shared devices, mixed devices, and population impact is quite interesting, that the different specificities of some huge markets.
Whether it's pornography, weapons, or restricted products like alcohol and tobacco, we don't want kids being able to access this stuff at the click of a button, the same way we don't let them walk into a store and buy it with cash. But the conversation about age assurance is tied up in debates around free speech, digital trust, youth access to resources online, mental health, and other complicated legal and social issues. It involves Silicon Valley, the US Supreme Court, governments in the EU, Europe, and Australia, standards bodies, naked bodies, retailers, and digital rights groups. It's already incredibly complex, and it's just getting started.
Hopefully this afternoon we're going to be publishing the summit communique, which is a consensus view of the parties and people here of kind of where we stand. It's not an official document. We're not United Nations, but it is something which is about where we stand and how the next steps for age assurance.
Mm-hmm. And based on what you saw here this year, what do you expect to have changed by the time the summit takes place next year?
I think the big thing is we will have an international standard. So I think the part one of the International Standards Organisation, ISO 27566, will be published. It means it's a real, actual document then, rather than something we've been talking about. It seems like forever. So I'm very keen that we get that out. And then when you've got that and you've got a global consensus about what age assurance is and what the core characteristics are, people can start to build out from that.
A sincere thanks to Tony Allen and the Age Check Certification Scheme for hosting us at the 2025 Global Age Assurance Standards Summit. For more coverage, please visit www.biometricupdate.com. Thanks for listening.